Fairmont crest, not every secret arrives with a loud explosion. Some secrets live for a very long time in silence, hidden beneath the glossy surface of perfect dinners, family embraces that seem warm, and faces long accustomed to concealing more than confessing. But once an old truth is torn loose from the hastily packed earth, it never rises alone. It drags up everything people believed had been buried forever, turning every glance within a family into suspicion, every gesture of care into scrutiny, and every word of comfort into a soft blade driven straight into trust. This time, the center of that upheaval is not only the fact that Cod and Eva discover they have another half-sibling through their father. What is even more frightening is the feeling that this truth does not stand alone. It feels like the first shard breaking away from a much larger mirror, and behind those cracks are Ted, Shanice, a pregnancy that appears at far too perfect a moment, and the horrifying possibility that everything may be nothing more than linked pieces of the same secret, one that has been fed by silence for far too long. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video, and thank you for your trust. All the content I create is purely speculative and based on personal experience. If you find the video interesting and helpful, please support me with a like and a comment. The news of the half-sibling does not arrive as a decent confession. It leaks out in the cruelest possible way, through a chain of scattered traces that at first no one wants to believe. An old financial record, a secret allowance paid over many years, the name of a woman who once appeared and then vanished from Ted's life, and a medical document hidden so carefully that its existence alone feels like an indictment. At first, Cod is the one who reacts most violently, not because she is weaker than Eva, but because she lives by a sense of control. Cod can endure discomfort, insult, even betrayal, but what she cannot forgive is the feeling of being turned into the last person to know what is happening inside her own family. She has always believed that even if Fairmont Crest is a place full of lies, her family at least still had certain boundaries no one would dare cross. And now, the existence of another child alone is enough to prove that Ted has been living with an entire hidden life, separate from what he allowed the family to see. For Cod, the shock is not only about blood. It is a direct blow to her pride, the feeling that both her childhood and the memories she once treasured have suddenly become suspect. As if in every beautiful family photograph there had always been an absent figure that only Ted knew was there. Eva falls apart in a different way, quieter but deeper. She does not erupt in rage like Cod. She sinks. Because for Eva, every new secret dragged into the light does not merely destroy her faith in Ted, it also tears down another fragile part of her definition of herself. She is far too familiar with the feeling of standing at the outer edge of acceptance, too used to studying other people's expressions to guess whether she is truly loved or merely tolerated for the moment. The appearance of another half-sibling hurts not only because of the deception, but because it awakens the most terrifying question of all: if Ted could hide another child for so many years, then was everything he gave her also just a carefully measured version of duty rather than a whole and honest truth? The more she thinks, the more Eva feels as if she is standing in a house with an empty foundation. She begins to remember the moments when Ted hesitated, the times he changed the subject whenever someone came too close to the past, the occasions when he seemed gentle but a flash of cold fear passed through his eyes. And that terrifies Eva even more than the new secret itself, because she begins to believe this was never the only lie. Ted, at the center of all this ruin, can no longer maintain the mask of a man able to steer any crisis through calm and reason. When the secret of the other child is exposed, the clearest thing visible in him is not surprise but a kind of panic compressed until it has become distorted. It is the reaction of a man who is not shocked because he has been discovered, but because the final line of dominoes has at last begun to fall. For years, Ted has convinced himself that some truths should stay buried to protect the family, protect their reputation, protect everything that took too long and cost too much to build. He called it sacrifice, a burden that only he had to carry, the price of keeping everything running. But deep down, Ted knows very well that it was also cowardice. He did not keep silent out of nobility, but because he did not have the courage to face the consequences of his own actions. And because of that, when Kot looks at him with eyes so cold they feel merciless, when Eva steps back as though merely standing near him has become suffocating, Ted understands that what is breaking now is no longer a single secret. It is the image of the father he spent years constructing. Before the family can even swallow the first shock, Shanice drops another bomb into Fairmont Crest. She announces that she is pregnant. The timing is so perfect for chaos that no one can hear the news without thinking about motive. If Shanice could once still stand in the gray zone of sympathy, the pregnancy instantly pushes her to the center of suspicion. For Kot, it is almost living proof that every woman who enters Ted's orbit carries with her a layer of murky deception. She does not see Shanice as a victim or a frightened woman, but as a new threat who has found a way to legitimize her place through the one weapon no one dares strike too hard, an unborn child. Kot hates the feeling that she is watching history repeat itself in front of her, hates the possibility that Ted may once again have been living a double life, and hates even more that a pregnancy forces the entire family to hesitate before they can chase the truth to its end. But Shanice does not enter this storm with the calm of someone who has calculated every step. She, too, is being worn down by her own fear. Announcing the pregnancy precisely when Ted's family is in turmoil is not simply an opportunistic move, even if on the surface everyone has reason to think so. Shanice knows very well that if she remains silent, she will sink deeper into a nameless relationship, an unprotected position, a bomb that could be denied completely the moment a crisis hits. But she also understands that speaking now will instantly make her a suspect in everyone's eyes. The pregnancy therefore becomes a double-edged blade. It is both the only thing that might force Ted to face responsibility and the very thing that makes Shanice look like someone who has come to steal whatever remains of a family already split open. What drives her further into despair is that Ted's reaction does not entirely resemble that of a man who has just learned he is about to have a child. In his eyes there is not only shock. There is a deeper layer of fear, as if this news of pregnancy has touched something he has long begged fate never to reveal. That very moment makes both Kot and Eva, despite reacting differently, realize at the same time that the half-sibling and the pregnancy may not be two separate shocks at all. Kot is the first to give voice to that suspicion with an almost ruthless harshness. She starts stringing together every sign that had been ignored. The unusual concern Ted showed Shanice, the times he interfered too heavily in matters that should have remained private, the confusion he could not hide whenever Shanice's name appeared in a family context, and above all the way he reacts to the pregnancy as though he is seeing the past return in a new form. Kot does not need complete proof to suspect. She only needs the feeling that she has been lied to for too long. From that point on, her anger changes direction. It no longer aims solely at Ted, but spreads to Shanice, to anyone who seems to know more than they have said. And even to Eva whenever Eva shows softness toward the idea that the unborn child should be protected from the war of adults. Eva, on the other hand, is torn apart by a more painful inner struggle. She suspects Shanice too, sees the timing of the announcement as suspicious too, and feels clearly that Ted is hiding something even more terrible. But Eva cannot look at the pregnancy as only a tool. She knows too well what it feels like to pay the price for sins she did not commit. She knows what it means to be defined by the secrets of adults, by wrongful choices she never had any power to prevent. So even if Shanice is lying, even if the pregnancy is part of a new power game, Eva still cannot let herself slide entirely into Kot's cruelty. And that is what pushes the sisters into another fracture. Kot sees Eva's hesitation as weakness, as a sign that Eva is once again about to stand on the wrong side, once again about to let pity become a doorway for the next betrayal. Eva, meanwhile, comes to the painful realization that in a crisis like this, trying to preserve the last trace of humanity can itself be treated as something suspicious. The truth begins to draw closer not because of Ted, but because of someone else who knew in advance and chose silence. That person remains quiet neither out of loyalty nor out of a desire to protect anyone, but because the truth is most valuable when released at the moment it can destroy the most. An old file copied in secret, a test result whose date was altered, a covert money transfer from years ago, and a recent medical appointment of Shanice's finally form a pattern no one wants to face directly. The name of the half-sibling is not the result of a closed accident in the past. That person's existence is proof that Ted once tried to erase the consequences of a relationship with money, with agreements, with a disappearance carefully arranged. And most frightening of all, that pattern appears to be repeating itself. Shanice may not simply be Ted's lover. A more horrifying possibility begins to emerge. Shanice has a direct connection to that old secret, perhaps as a niece, an adopted daughter, someone entrusted to another's care, or the final link to a woman Ted once pushed out of his life to protect everything he had. If that is true, then Shanice's arrival, her growing closeness to Ted, and her pregnancy announcement at exactly this moment are no longer a simple moral scandal. It becomes a devastating catastrophe because it opens the possibility that Ted has repeated a cycle of guilt he once believed he had erased completely. Ted begins to collapse inward long before the full truth is publicly revealed. Every choice now leads to loss. If he denies Shanice, he will look like a man repeating a pattern of cruelty toward a pregnant woman at the very moment his family has learned he once did something similar in the past. If he acknowledges that the child may be his, he will be pushing Cod and Eva into the belief that he truly never changed, that his life has been nothing more than a chain of lies held together by privilege. But what Ted fears most still lies deeper than those surface reactions. He fears the moment Cod and Eva realize that the chaos did not begin when Shanice appeared. It began because he had already nurtured a darkness large enough that anyone who stepped into it could become evidence against him. In that tearing conflict, Ted is no longer fighting to preserve his image. He is fighting only to cling to the slim chance that someone might still say that after everything, he could be forgiven. And the more desperately he tries to hold on to that, the more he reacts in ways that make everything worse, controlling, concealing, evading, trying to make decisions for others. As though the old power still works in a crisis born precisely from that power. Cod is the first to collapse, and she does so in the most violent way, but she is also the first to rebuild herself through anger. Her pain immediately transforms into the will to hunt the truth to the end. She no longer wants to hear beautiful excuses about protection, circumstances, or past mistakes. To Cod, every explanation now is nothing more than the way powerful people ask others to endure the consequences of their choices more politely. She becomes hard to the point of cruelty, willing to tear open records, force those involved to speak, and drive both Shanice and Ted to choose between confession and destruction layer by layer. That same intensity makes Cod a real threat to everyone, but it also slowly turns her into the very thing she hates most. A person who allows pain to transform her into an instrument of punishment that no longer distinguishes right from wrong. Eva falls apart more slowly, but more deeply, because she does not have the release of pure fury. She is pulled between two opposing forces that cannot be reconciled, standing with the truth or standing with the unborn child. The closer she comes to the secret, the more she realizes she is no longer fighting only to know what Ted has done, but to decide who she herself will become after the truth explodes. If she stands with Cod, she will help push Shanice and the pregnancy into the heart of judgment, perhaps logically justified but cruel in consequence. If she leans toward protecting Shanice, she will once again be seen as a traitor, as the one who always chooses the wrong side at exactly the wrong moment. In the end, Eva realizes that the most painful thing is not that her family has another half-sibling, nor even the shock of the pregnancy. The deepest pain is seeing herself forced to grow up inside a war where no choice allows her to remain clean. When the final secret explodes, it does not merely confirm that Ted hid yet another truth. It confirms that the entire current crisis has been built on layers of silence stacked on top of one another. Ted knows more than he admits. Someone within the family discovered the truth early but stayed quiet while waiting for the most useful moment. Shanice is not entirely innocent, but neither is she the monster Cot wants to believe. And the pregnancy is the catalyst that drives past and present crashing into one another. Whether the baby is Ted's or not will eventually be settled by a test, but by then the biological answer is no longer the only thing that matters. Because in the waiting, every glance, every accusation, every moment of Ted's hesitation, and every instance of Shanice withholding part of the truth has already shattered what once held them together as a family. Ted does not lose everything in a single second, he loses it piece by piece. First comes Scott's trust, once so powerful that she saw him as the unbreakable axis of her world. Then comes Eva's painful but still hopeful faith, which now dissolves into a cold distance. Then he loses the possibility of seeing Shanice as a human being rather than as living proof of his own moral failure. Finally, what disappears most completely is the possibility of forgiveness. Because forgiveness does not die when people discover a secret. It dies when they realize that secret was only part of a habit of concealment so deeply woven into the way a person exists. And that is Ted's harshest punishment, not losing his family in name, but having to live inside his own house as a man everyone can still see, yet no one trusts enough to truly keep. At Fairmont Crest, the surface will eventually be tidied up. There will be neat clothing, dinners arranged once more, and stories softened for the comfort of outsiders. But beneath that calm, Cot will forever remember the sensation of the ground under her feet cracking because of her father. Eva will carry a wound that can never fully be sewn shut, a tear between compassion and truth. Shanice will understand that a child, no matter how innocent, can still be pushed into the center of a war if it enters the world of adults who live by secrets. And Ted will be left to face the most terrible thing he has always tried to escape, not that what he hid was finally revealed, but that in the final moment, when everything had already fallen apart, he understood that the greatest secret of his life had never been the hidden children or the shocking pregnancy. The greatest secret was that he had spent too many years trading everything away for control, until when he finally wanted to be forgiven sincerely, he no longer even knew where the truth was supposed to begin.